Wow, ladies and gentlemen, I'm so blessed today on the Kelly Brewer Show to welcome Frankie Randazzo and Carl Richardson. If y'all don't know these guys, you soon will. And well, let's dive right in. Really appreciate you guys being here. I know y'all are busy and a lot going on, summertime. So talk about what's near and dear to your heart, I suppose. I mean, I know you guys play music together, y'all. Oh my gosh, the band I saw at the Bayou Cafe. Holy crap, that sounded so good. Bass, even bass.
He and Jared Foreman are my first two calls when I can't make a gig.
Is that right?
Yep.
I'll give you $20 right now. Thank you. Appreciate it. No, Carl's a world-class bass player.
Oh my gosh, yeah. No, I saw you with I saw you play with Chuck Berry. Remember that back at Nutty Jerry's?
Yeah.
And that was, I think, maybe the first time I actually saw you play piano. And basically, you saved him. I mean, he must have been 86 or something, and I think he was deaf. He certainly didn't remember the songs.
I've got stories on that gig.
And he kept, I remember he kept looking over at you, and you were like, oh, and then you just started riding, and then basically the whole
the bass player, Jimmy Marcella, the bass player, we get to the gig, and there's a whole dialogue of stuff that happened before the gig. The email exchanges are hysterical. And Jimmy gets there, and it's me and Trey Newmiller. And because he had called me, he says, hey, do you know a drummer? And I was like, Trey Newmiller, you know. And he's going, hey, so tonight's gig, we had about a 15-minute rehearsal prior to the gig at the venue.
Wow.
He goes,
How did that go? Was that chaotic?
No, it was, let me tell you. He goes, this is A. He goes, this is C. He goes, this is D. He goes, this is E. He goes, and this is G. And I'm just, being as respectful as possible, about to play with a legend, the guy that created everything, And I go, Mr. Marsala, and he goes, what? And there's only three of us, It's not like a classroom.
That's right.
I said, why is this G? He goes, ground. I'm pointing to the ground.
Ground.
I went, okay, got it. He says, and whatever you do, don't follow Chuck. Follow me. And I look at Trey, because I'm the only other pitched instrument in that sense. It's Jimmy, drums, and Chuck.
He was the bass player, Jimmy?
Jimmy Marsala is his tour manager and bass player.
Yeah.
So we do about 15 minutes with Jimmy, mostly conversation, really no rehearsal. We go back to the dressing room, and Chuck Berry's just sitting there like this, reclined back. He's got his captain's hat on, the red sequin shirt, and he's just kicked back, and he's not saying anything. He's just looking at everybody. And there's a sheriff's department and a nurse. And I go, okay, and there's a briefcase. He gets paid before the gig.
Right.
In cash.
Right.
That's his thing. So there's another cop had the briefcase. And we get up, we go do the show. Chuck's all over the place. It's really hard. It's hard, probably the hardest gig I've ever done as far as following somebody and supporting the artist, Right. That's my job as a piano player, support him because it's his show.
Right.
And he does he invites all these ladies up on stage.
I remember.
Right?
That was half the show.
Just random audience members?
He's playing the song, and he's all over the place. He's 84 at the time. And it was.
I think he was deaf.
Yeah. Oh, no, it was tough. It was tough on all aspects. And these ladies are dancing on stage, and Chuck does his little duck walk, and he walks off the stage in the middle of the song, goes through the dressing room doors close, and we're still on stage. Jimmy's playing. Got the girls, and Jimmy cues us to stop. Stop. And no thank you or anything like that. Jimmy turns around, turns his bass amp off, goes to Chuck's 2 amps, and I go, Jimmy, are we done? He goes, oh, yeah, we've been done. There's the whole venue. People are still on stage.
No, I was there, yeah.
And I turn around. And
no announcement?
Nothing. No thank you, good night.
45 minutes?
No encore, nothing, And I turn around, and I wave at everybody in the crowd, like, thanks. Yeah. And I walk off the stage, and I go backstage, and there's Chuck Berry sitting in that same spot, like he hadn't even moved. And then he got up and left. It was just the most bizarre interaction.
How much did he make? I don't even want to know. What would you guess?
He probably was $10,000 at the time.
Oh, yeah.
I got paid $300.
Yeah.
I don't even know if I ever cashed that check. I think I still have it in my.
Kept it as a keepsake.
Yeah, I mean it's the email prior to the gig was I was trying to get information as to what the show would consist of.
Right. Give me some songs.
Because he's got 280 something pieces of work. So I'm on YouTube for the whole week trying to just learn his songs. And he says Chuck never goes to the 4, by the way. There was on a lot of his songs, there's a progressional thing that he doesn't ever do, which was weird. And if you listen to him, you're like, oh, wow, he does do that. I forget what it was.
So a question about that, not to get too technical,
yeah.
but you mean he doesn't do on bar 2, like the quick change to the 4, and he also doesn't do it in the turnaround. But he does go in bar 5,
I think on the turnaround he'll stay on the 5. And
I can't tell you how many times I've played Chuck Berry songs. I'm like, oh no, it doesn't go down. It stays on the 5.
Stays on the 5
at the end. You know?
I think that's what it was. This is
Yeah.
1,000 years ago, but we would 5, 4,
Right.
5, 4, 1. Yeah, the turnaround. But he just stays 5, 5. Then 1.
5, 5, 1. Yeah. So we just got nerdy real quick, didn't we, on the music theory?
Most people know it.
Yeah,
What you're listening, what
Absolutely.
you're saying.
Yeah. So it was just he probably got paid $10,000.
Wow.
And but the email
45 minutes.
Yeah, the email exchange was what do I do? And finally the guy responds back to me, the tour manager, and he says these are the first 4 songs. He says after that it's a 40. The email, I saved the email. He says it's a 45-minute jam with a legend. Enjoy yourself. And I was like, okay, cool. And that relieved a lot of my stress,
Right, right.
And we got up there and played and had a good time. And
I thought you
Yeah.
made it. I thought you made him look good. I really do.
Thank you. I appreciate
Because he was just gone. There was nothing left, And he even said it. He said, "Y'all just came to see if I had anything left." And
Yeah.
really, he didn't. Because
Yeah.
now, was it true? I remember I watched a thing with Keith Richards. He jammed with him. I don't know, 80s or something, and he was complaining that he was playing in like B flat.
He would switch keys mid-song on us. Like if we were in G, he would go to A, and that's why when Jimmy told me that, it made all the sense during the show. He says, "Don't follow Chuck. Like if Chuck modulates, if you go somewhere else, you stay right with me," because he says he'll come back.
Come back.
But his hands were.
Was he? Do you think he was doing it as a mistake, or was he doing it intentionally to go outside, like to?
No. I'm
giving him too much credit.
You are, yeah. His hands. He didn't have the dexterity.
Yeah.
And
He would just get confused and find himself in a different key.
I mean, I do that now.
yeah,
Can you imagine being 84?
I just that he even got up there and did 45 minutes,
Yeah, yeah.
and did whatever he did is pretty phenomenal.
Yeah.
My dad's 82, and
Does your dad play music? Is he a musician?
no, but that's funny enough. He's the one that pushed me into music. So we moved to Vidor, didn't know anybody, and we're stuck out here in the woods. And one Christmas, I got a guitar.
Mhm.
Well, I'm stuck in the woods. I'm isolated, and I said, okay, let me try it. And then 2 years later, I'm at the Vidor Escapades, playing a song, and the next day, I didn't know anybody the day before. The next day, everybody knew who I was. Girls, the whole thing. I said, "Oh, okay, I have found my niche."
Oh, your Uncle Jam. I was the biggest fan.
Uncle Jam back in
I
the day.
loved it. I loved it.
So fun. I appreciate it.
You had a good story about Doug Kershaw.
Oh yeah. I was when you were telling your story about
What do you think?
Chuck Berry. I was thinking about Doug Kershaw.
Pull this down. We can see
Do,
this.
do you know the name Doug Kershaw?
Yeah. He's a country dude, right?
You're thinking of Sammy Kershaw.
Okay.
So Doug Kershaw is his cousin, and he and his brother Rusty they were like a duo in the 50s or 60s. They had a song called Louisiana Man.
Okay.
Back in the 50s, probably 60s, mid 60s, early 60s. And so he's a Grammy Award winning Louisiana legend, fiddle player. Played with Leon Russell, played all the big festivals. I mean, knows Marty Stewart personally, things like that. So I get a gig with him, and I'm thinking, highest profile gig I've ever had. Great, let's do this. And I even thought about, offering to join his band or being open to that.
Right.
And it was kind of a pickup thing anyway. So I thought, okay, if this goes well, he may want me to stick around.
Bass.
Bass, yeah. No real vocals. I don't think we did any harmony vocals, but we ended up on a gig, and he had a live record and also some, multiple albums. I listened to all of them. And in one case, you're learning the music, no rehearsals going in. In one case, there was a tune that had a walking bass line, and it was the same on the live record as it was on the recorded record. And so I get on stage the first time, same day meeting him, and I'm playing it exactly like the original recording. And he turns around as soon as we start, he turns around, like he's smiling as he's playing, this big beaming smile. And then it's like he turns around and it's like Angel the Demon, and he's barking at the band. And I can't tell if he's barking at me or what. He does it a few times, and I realize he's talking to me. And afterward, in between songs, he says, "That's not right. It's not the right feel. You got to do this, that, and the other." And he just blows through this description, and I can't really even interpret. And afterward, I just remember thinking, there was no hope in that situation. Yeah. Sometimes you just have to you take it on the chin and move on to the next song. But I did 2 gigs with him, and I think that was the second one, and I quit. I'm like, I don't care how high profile you are, how great the money might be, but, you know, and that sounds like I'm criticizing him. I guess I am in a way, but I respected the guy, but it just, I don't care how great the gig is. I don't like a situation that has toxicity or negativity in it, you know.
Right.
And it was just weird to me. There was a weird psychological component to it as well, because you could tell he was so used to just being this character.
Yeah.
But then it would just turn on a dime.
Right.
And I just don't like it when people disrespect their band members, especially after you've done above and beyond,
Right.
you know, and all this work to come into an unrehearsed situation. And it was weird.
Narcissists. That's what
Maybe
it sounds like.
I didn't take it that way, and he was always very personable and friendly off the bandstand. So
Yeah.
that was interesting too. It's like you could tell it wasn't personal to him. And to his credit, he was older at this time, late 70s maybe.
Oh, yeah.
And I don't think that he was as good at it as he had always been. So his intros were kind of rough and whatnot. But yeah, that was a weird
Yeah,
situation.
maybe he was nervous, about his product.
Could be.
Realizing he was.
All right. Since you guys told a story, I got to tell a story.
Yeah.
So we're in Florida. We're playing. This was me and Ken's band. It's called, I think we were called Frontier at the time. We were playing in a club in Florida. And Richie Blackmore and the guy that sang for his band Rainbow, Joe Lynn Turner, they were there, okay? And man, I grew so excited. We after the first set, I went and I found him, right? And I said, man, you got to come, talking to Joe Lynn, you got to come do a song with us. Everybody knows Tush. Let's do Tush. Oh yeah, no problem. Well, he's hitting on women and he's running his game, and I saw it, but whatever. And Richie was there, dark. He was, and both of these guys maybe were 5 feet tall. I mean, they're little bitty tiny. You know how these performers are so tiny. And he's in his snakeskin boots, and he's had the hair and whatever. I couldn't really see him that well, but music's blaring, whatever, and I'll go, Richie, I'm classic. I'm just slobbering, And Richie Blackmore, wow, so cool. He said, if you could tell me one thing that I could do that would help me in my career, what would it be? And I could barely hear him. And he said, don't do it.
Wow.
I thought, I wasn't sure if I heard that right, Anyway, I said, what? So I walked with the set was fixing to start. Joe Lynn was fixing to get up. And so we start Tush. We open it with that. And he takes his time. He's coming through, he's walking through. Here we're 18, 24 bars into Tush on the intro, and he's just taking his time. Finally, he jumps up on stage, and the whole room just surged towards him. And I'm sitting there watching that, and I've never experienced that. And I was like, wow, there's something that he's got that I don't have. Anyway, he sang. It was beautiful. He's got this rich baritone. The whole room was just right there on him. So that combined with Richie saying, don't do it. And then there was another experience later in Georgia, but I felt like I was being warned, because I was hell bent. I was going to go for it. I didn't know the Lord. I didn't know none of that, and I was just fixing to dive off into the dark, And I fortunately got turned around, had the kids, when I was 27. But Richie Blackmore telling me, "Don't do it." It was just It just stuck with me. And then watching Joe, the way the whole audience was just right there in his hand, the way he did it. So I knew that I had a long way to go. And then with Richie saying, maybe I wouldn't like what I found when I got there. So that was a paradigm for me, was that night.
So in a parallel universe where the timeline split, you're a famous musician.
Yeah. After that, if I hadn't met that, I would have been the drug addict. I probably would have been dead by now, is what I'm thinking.
You don't think you would have thrived in music?
Yeah, I would have. Oh, absolutely. But I would have been a shooting star. Because in my mind, I'm looking at all these guys that are so good, and the stuff is just so incredibly out there. They're all drug addicts, major freaking heroin addicts and stuff. And I wasn't a drug addict. I wasn't even an alcoholic. But I thought, man, I must have, like I said, I didn't have the Lord. I didn't have no sense. And so I thought, man, I got to dive off into that. to really make it, you know. I mean, I don't know. Nobody's standing there telling me do this, don't do that. You're just out there on your own. And so I was fixing to dive off because I thought that was the recipe, you know. And but then these few things made me realize. Looking back, I see it now. Man, I was right. The devil was right. The door was open. I was stepping through willingly, you know. So anyway, I'm glad I stopped. I had a family. Now it's fun. Now music is just fun.
Yeah.
It didn't kill me.
I think that's the highly creatives that we surround ourselves with have those extremes in the personalities where they're incredibly talented, but they want everything and they do everything more and deeper, and that's where years ago, you know, the drugs were in the scene and things like that, where those people are just more extreme in all facets of their lives. Those highly creatives, you know, but you have to find a balance of the right people to be around.
You know, I see when I interviewed Aaron and I watch him and interact with him, and he seems like he's kind of riding that razor's edge a little bit, you know. And I've been praying for him, but he's so fun and creative. He's
the funniest person.
Like, he really
if you go to our TikTok on Catalina, which we're all older, so the fact that we're using TikTok to market the band is funny in itself. But he's got some of the funniest clips on there because he's just genuinely a goofball,
right?
And he's so innocent about it.
He is.
There's so many times we did a thing at the beach Memorial Day weekend. We did, and we come out of the beach cabin getting dressed, and he's just leaning against the fence, and he's in his little captain's hat and little stupid thing that we do, and he looked like a third grade graduation picture. He's just got this little smile on his face, and then he gets on stage and he destroys the guitar.
Right.
That hybrid picking thing that he does,
right.
and I'll look at Jason and Chris, and we're like, what? How did he do that?
How did he do that?
He's so good at it,
It was with Zito. I've been thinking about it. Y'all were with Zito there at Bayou Cafe.
Yeah, Todd's done a really cool thing at Bayou Cafe, of bringing the bands in, and when Mike's in town, he'll hit up that.
Yeah,
and that's been a lot of fun because I've been on the road with Mike, and I've done the local pickup jobs with Mike. So when you're on the tour, like when we did, Midwest, and we went down to Nashville and did all Florida. We were out for a whole month. You do 6 on, 1 off, 6 on, 1 off, 6 on, 1 off, 6 on, 1
That's
off.
That's tough.
It's and Mike's the hardest working guy I know.
Really?
He drives to every gig. He's on the phone the whole time. We go do the gig. We're up the next day, 7, 8 o'clock, back on the road.
Wow.
It's so impressive to see how he's built that organization around himself. But when Mike is home, when he's at Bayou Cafe or Katie's or the other High Tides when that was open, his show at home is completely different from the touring show.
Really?
His touring show is structured, his music, there's key points in the show. When he's home, he goes for it. And he does stuff on guitar that you'll never see him do on tour because he can actually cut loose and have fun.
Yeah.
And that's the part that him and I enjoy because it'll turn into just chaos.
Something I've never seen anybody do. And I saw him do it that night. He was talking, the blues are about, men and women and the troubles that we have. And he said, I went home, my old lady was mad at me, and she started she started ragging on me. And he wasn't even looking at the guitar. He kind of made it sound like a woman ragging a man as he said, and I was like, that sounds exactly wah.
Yeah.
And I was like, he's actually literally making the guitar talk.
Yeah. Oh yeah. Yeah.
That's amazing.
Yeah.
And that, funny enough, that the day before, I actually was on a flight with him from Dallas. And, I got so excited, and I said, hey, man, come on the podcast. And he says, I said, I live in Byron. He goes, well, we'll be in Byron tomorrow. I was like, okay. Then I came out and saw you, and I was like, damn.
Was that just a coincidence? You
Just
ended
a
up on a flight with him?
Yeah. My sister lives in Dallas. So.
He'll be the first person to tell you that he probably stole that from Eddie Van Halen.
Oh, yeah?
Steve Vai used to do that
Steve Vai
with Frank
used to
Zappa.
do that, yeah, Eddie Van Halen and Frank Zappa. Mike he's a metal guitar
He loves
player.
him some Van Halen.
Loves Van Halen.
We put a band together called Sugar Daddy back in 2020
COVID,
when COVID happened. I was fortunate enough for him to call me, and I didn't have any gigs, as none of us
COVID,
did.
yeah.
But Mike was able to book local gigs at that time. You know, he's Mike Zito,
Yeah.
so that was cool. I got to play in April and moving forward of 2020 when
Yeah.
nobody else was.
Where
you
were
know?
y'all playing?
So I thank Mike for that. We played at Dillon's. We played at Bayou Cafe, I
Okay.
think.
Local, yeah.
We did private parties.
Mhm.
You know, so we were doing the blues thing often during COVID when no one was working. No musicians had much work. And then he thought, well, we're kind of burning them out on the blues. Let's do a rock band. So we took Todd Stark, Todd Howard, myself, and Mike and put together a 80s and 90s rock band, basically, like sing-alongs, you
Yeah.
know, a radio hit, top 40 kind of stuff, a lot of alternative, Van Halen, AC/DC, stuff like that. So that was really cool. I hope we can resurrect it one day. I don't think we've done that for at least 2 years
Sugar
now.
daddies.
Yeah, well, he's gone. Mike's
Mike's
out of here.
Mike's moving back to St. Louis.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
He's done.
Yeah, he's moving back to St. Louis. In fact, the whole band. I talked to Matt Johnson. Matt's in Houston this week. We're producing an album. I talked to him last week, and they're all centralizing in St. Louis. Mike's building a big studio up there,
Oh, I see.
and he's from St. Louis.
Oh, he is from St.
Yeah,
Louis.
he's originally from St. Louis.
He
so-
didn't really strike me as from around here.
No. He married Laura. And she was from St. Louis, and they moved down here, and so now he's headed back up there. And he told me at a gig, and I didn't know he was moving, and kind of ripped my heart out, man. 'Cause
Yeah, I bet.
Mike was when Mike first moved here. He didn't have any gigs. You know, he didn't know anybody. He would come play at Madison's, and I couldn't afford to pay him much. You know, so. I would always send him home with a piece of cheesecake for Laura as a thank you to Laura
Yeah.
for giving up his
Right,
time.
right.
And so Mike and I kind of both grew up together in that sense, and I've been a big supporter of his sobriety and his
Yeah,
career.
I saw on Facebook he was struggling with eating. You know, he talked about
Yeah,
it.
no, he's very open about it, and Mike's a beautiful person, and Mike's made me a better player. I'll tell you right now, just in the last 5 or 10 years, you know, I'm more confident, and I'll take jobs that I wouldn't normally take, and you've made me a better player, and Ken and Jason, and I mean everybody, surrounding yourself with better players. You were talking about the blues. The blues, people think is easy.
Mhm.
It's not, and people think country music is easy, and we're and the yacht rock stuff that we do, like when we dive in and dissect these songs, we'll look at each other and go, man, that's intricate.
Yeah.
Like some of the bass parts and some of that country stuff that we were working on, you wouldn't expect it because it's so fluid and so smooth that you glance right over it when you're listening, but when you dive in and you listen to it, you're like, wow, they're really, really good at what they do, you know? And a lot of people think that music is simple. It's not.
It's
to
not.
do it properly. The blues is terribly difficult to do it properly. And when you do it properly, you almost sound like you're not doing it properly. It's one of those weird
It comes off as
stylistic.
effortless.
Yeah. Stylistically, you're like, what happened there? You know.
It's definitely more communicative, I think,
The
than
blues?
the blues, yeah, than most other styles of music. Blues and jazz is very interactive, and you know, it's meant to convey emotion on a higher level than I
Right.
think most music. But I agree with you. Like
Yeah.
country and blues are deceptively hard because
Deceptively.
they're not. It's not hard technically. Often, you know,
Yeah.
well, depending on what
Yeah.
you're doing, like a piano solo, that's one thing. But
Yeah.
but generally speaking, I think what's hard about root styles, like
Mhm.
like old school country, you know, gospel,
Mhm.
blues, zydeco, things like that, is that it's often not technically difficult, but if you come off as anything but authentic,
Yeah.
people know it.
That's right.
Yeah.
You know, so it comes from culture. It's representing a culture, and there's all this history behind
Yeah.
it. Whereas pop music or like modern country, which is very produced and pop, if you will, it's just it's a mixed bag. But this stuff has this stamp and origin to
You're
it.
right.
You
Yeah,
know,
you're right.
and I know the older I get, and I'm always kind of internally. I don't talk about it a lot, but I'm always internally fascinated by this. I play so much simpler the older I get. So as I age, I mean, I don't. People may want to argue this if they've seen me play in one setting or another, because I'm sure I overplay. I'm not saying I don't overplay and get tacky sometimes, but you know, a local gig at the local watering hole versus playing a higher profile gig, you know, on a higher level. I may not I may not do that. But because, the stakes are higher, you're more visible and whatnot. So there's that continuum, there's that dynamic and all that. But I sort of like enjoy the challenge of playing simpler for the purpose of trying to be as authentic as possible in any given style. Like that matters more to me now than how cool the song is or how cool the bass part is or how fun it is or how challenging it is, I mean, if I can just play a two-feel in country or jazz, or Zydeco or whatever, I want to keep it solid. I want to keep it simple, Whereas when I was younger, I didn't care about that. I want to play my instrument.
Right.
And so, I mean, I'm talking more about how musicians mature and what goes into that.
Well, that's a paradigm.
But
That's a paradigm right there.
Then you have to know the style, And I can easily say that before playing with Mike, I didn't know blues as well as I do now. So I've definitely learned a lot from him and that experience.
So for me, Mike was you go blues 1-4-5. Everybody's like, oh, it's easy, 1-4-5 country, 1-4-5 minor 2 minor 6 whatever. They break it down to these very basic formulas, but what they don't understand, and I still don't understand, but Mike exposed me to that, is understanding the language of the blues and the language, the conversational nature of those songs, and how to properly play them. And he made me really understand the simplicity of what we need to do and not to overplay. And I still overplay, and I have to consciously because I like to hear my keyboard. It's fun. I have to consciously make myself play less, and I find that when I listen back to what I've done, it supports the song or the show or the artist or whatever much better. To the point where I carry a specific piece of equipment now. I have a Leslie cabinet because it sounds so good that I can play less.
Yeah, tone. Boy, we could have a whole conversation about tone.
But I can literally
the power
just
of tone.
hold down just a simple interval chord behind Mike or Catalina or any of these other things, and the sound is so beautiful and so full that I don't have to overplay. So I carry this big cabinet.
That's a great point.
People are like, why do you carry that thing everywhere? I'm like, because it makes me want to listen to the simplicity of what that cabinet
If you had the same patch coming out of your keyboard and just running into a basic monitor,
it's that much of a
it
difference.
influences the way you play.
Absolutely.
Tone affects the way you play in a big way, and I don't hear people talk. Well, I'm sure it happens on podcasts like this, but in general conversation, even among musicians, people don't really talk about that. Tone, and for bass, it's huge. If I can't hear myself, or if I don't like the tone, and also with vocals, man, I just play like crap. I mean, like when the tone is like country. We're doing this country project now. When you think about country bass, you want that big fat foundation that just covers the stage. You think about country dance halls. And if that's not there often, it doesn't feel right for the song, and I may want to make up for that unwittingly. So I might play it differently, right? But when everything sounds perfect and you just hit one note, just you love that. It's almost like earlier I mentioned, how the older I get, the more I want to play simpler than I would have if I were younger. I like to describe that as thinking more like a producer than a player, right? You're putting on a producer's hat. It may be live, but you're still representing what they did in the studio, what production happened for that track, So if you think like a producer on stage with the goal of playing as much like the CD or the original recording or a CD as possible, that I often feel like if I'm overplaying or I'm less comfortable style-wise, meeting that mark for authenticity, I'll just stop and I'll forget about what I want to do or what's going through my mind, and I just say play it like the CD, play it like the CD, because it's easy to do that when the tone is right, when the sound, the mix, and you're hearing everything and it sounds like a CD. But when you don't have that, you're subconsciously often making up for it, and then you overplay or you play it wrong, or you play it different. And I play improv music all the time, but in certain settings you shouldn't be improvising, So yeah, I think that all comes down to tone and sound.
At what point in time did you learn that because we're kind of spoiled in the sense when we do like the Catalina show or some of the bigger shows where we have in-ears and we have individual monitor control, and I can sit back at my spot and I can control what I hear and I make my in-ears sound like a recording, you know. When you don't have that luxury of a good monitor mix and you still have to power through, and as a keyboard player, for a guy like Mike, he's loud, and that's part of his show, and that's part of his tone, and that's part of the appeal. Jason Touche was in Podunk. You know, he started Podunk many years ago, and I got the opportunity to live like my dream of playing for Podunk for not many shows, but a lot of shows, and to be able to share that stage with Jason, who I admire for his career, and Paul Sorosky and all those guys. And I went through 3 keyboard amps playing for Podunk because
trying to compete with all
it
the
was
guitar
so
amps.
loud on stage. But that's what that was the expectation, and we laugh about it. You know, I tried to go in ears with Mike, and that wasn't working. You know, so what point in time did you learn that even if you can't hear, you got to do it?
I think I knew that early on. I was just really bad at it.
Yeah,
I can get through a situation like that now because I've had the experience and have dealt with it.
But if it gets in your head that you can't hear anything, like you just want to go home, you know?
Yeah, often if you're on a gig and you don't know the music that well, you're sitting in.
Mm-hmm.
It's a pickup job. You're following the band members. If I can hear myself well, I'll react like pretty quickly. If I can't hear myself that well, or I don't like the tone, I find myself making more mistakes, or I don't have an edge in terms of reacting to that song I don't know. You know, so and that's a tonal thing too.
Critical for the bass player, because what I'm learning over time is that the bass is almost the lead instrument. People are listening. What the bass and the drums are doing really is.
Told you.
You know, it's more than 50% of what I think the song does.
I can't tell you how many times I've had a similar realization on stage by just hitting a whole note after playing any given feel, right? And this could be something improvisatory, or it could be just me playing the structure of the song a little differently. You know, we can do that. Ken is so reactive.
Well, you do this thing now. You call it first order substitution.
Yeah.
And we'll be doing something, and he'll go from instead of playing the 1, he'll play the minor 6, or there's all these different intervals that you're so good with theory and so good at music. And when he does it, Chris and I and Aaron and Jay, everybody will all look at him, and I'll yell at him across the stage. I go, "What was that? What was that?" Because that instead of the 1, you'll play the 3 or something. You'll go to these
chord
different
substitutions
that he does. They're so beautiful.
You can go off. Those substitutions can easily not work.
Oh, yeah, yeah.
Go off the rails.
But you did one a couple weeks back.
I kind of know. I like to think that I know what works and what doesn't, and I use them sparingly. Otherwise, it can be chaotic.
The G sharp G in "Ride Like the Wind," you did one a couple weeks back at a show. What was it? Because we all still talk about it. It was so perfect.
So it was just 2 steps down the scale.
You went to the
That's
F.
how you apply that sub. It's the same for the music nerds out there. It's the same relationship between the major key center, whatever the 1 is in a major key, and the relative minor. So if you're in C, A minor is the relative minor. That relationship of just moving 2 notes back in that key, whatever chord happens there, that's the sub. I call it the first option sub. I just made that up because you can keep the melody the same, you can keep the chords on the guitar and the piano as long as they're not playing too much bass. And the bass player, like you described it as the bass is the lead. Well, it's not the lead in the forward-facing aspect of the band relative to the audience,
Right.
but it is the lead in terms of how to manage a band.
Absolutely.
And how to I don't want to use the word manipulate, but compel and influence other band members to play a certain way.
Well, your foundation.
The bass has more power than just about any instrument.
You control the chord.
You control the chord on the harmony side
Yeah.
in that way, as long as there aren't voicing issues, right?
Yeah.
If Frankie's playing a big double octave C down here and I play A, it's just going to be muddy
Weird,
with that.
yeah.
Yeah.
But if I see his hands in the middle, or he's doing this, or he's just padding in the middle, I know I can do it. So I can look over, I know it's going to work.
Yeah.
You know, if the guitar's not playing a low power chord,
Right.
and if it's chank chank, and we play yacht rock,
Right.
so if it's up here,
Chank, chank.
if it's up here, then I know it'll work. You know. But yeah, that's fun. I love the fact that you said that.
You know who gave me
not,
that?
Not for like in order to like just bask in that. I'm a bass player. Literally, he's giving some credit to the bass player, but because a lot of people don't realize that. And the internal dynamics of a band, that's where it really holds true,
Yeah.
because feel-wise and harmonically, you can drive the band, you can influence it a certain way. So when I say I can just play a whole note, Ken Turner's the best example of this. As soon as I change the feel, he's with me. He's off the snare. He might keep the groove, but he's off the snare, and everybody else reacts like
Right,
that.
right.
Now we're down,
Break it down,
instantly.
right.
And the drummer might do that, but if the bass player keeps going, you can continue to drive it. But yeah, feel and dynamics, I think, are influenced more by bass than any other instrument in a typical
Jeffrey.
rock band.
Y'all remember Jeffrey?
Yep. Yeah.
He's the one that finally, he clicked me in the head. He goes, you're not even the lead player. I'm the lead player. I said, what are you talking
Jeffrey
about?
who?
Jeffrey Elliott. He was our little bass player.
Oh
You
yeah, I
remember
know.
him?
I remember him. Yep.
He's part of the tribe.
Yep.
And he told me, and then I started listening to it in that way. And I was like, holy, he's right.
Him and the drummer are the bus drivers.
That's right.
Yeah, yeah.
And
It's easy, playing off the cuff, pick up stuff you don't know, whatever you want to call it. When you're playing guitar, I'm not gonna claim it's easy, but I do play guitar in bands more now than I did in the past. And as long as the bass and the kick drum are there on one, you don't have to play on one as a chord instrument.
Pretty much.
So there's a bit more pressure on a bass player, and a drummer can play, in that setting where he doesn't know a song. And Ken Turner's the best I've ever seen
God.
at this. It seems like, because he does it a lot. He works a lot.
Right.
We do this live band karaoke thing, and often we don't know any of the songs, but we'll pull the chords up and support this karaoke singer as a band. And Ken's very reactive.
He's just a natural.
But he doesn't have to deal with chords
been playing his whole life.
or any notes whatsoever. So a drummer in that setting can do. There's less they have to manage.
Right.
A chord player can rely on the bass, or if there's a guitar,
Yeah.
the keyboard player can listen, and if your ears are big, you can react very quickly within the key,
Right.
what's expected. But the bass player, it's so obvious if you don't play the root on
No,
the
yeah.
chord change, and it has to happen on the one.
Yeah, that bass player messes up. Everybody knows.
Yeah, it's
Well,
very
and I
very
had to
glaring.
I had to learn many, many years ago. Arthur Ford, bass player, he used to yell at me because my left hand would get too happy, and I didn't understand at the time. You're talking about paradigm shifts,
Yeah,
right?
yeah.
Arthur would always say, "Hey, stay out of here," and I didn't understand because I wanted to hear the full spectrum of my instrument. I was young, and I would do a lot of this. Now, I try to not go past a certain point. Probably the only time I ever hit a low note is in the beginning of Ride Like the Wind. It's the only time
Yeah.
I ever go down there.
Right.
But I also, all my patches, there's a low pass filter.
You mentioned this the other day
Yeah.
for the first time, and I was like, man, that's really thoughtful.
I low pass.
You're clearing out a frequency range for me.
Right.
And
Yeah.
you've been doing it the whole time, and now you just mentioned it. I'm like, thank you, Frankie.
Yeah,
That's cool,
thank
man.
you, Carl. I'm not the one. I appreciate you. But there's a point at which everything takes up space in that spectrum, and if there's too much low information, then it's not good for
Right.
anybody. So I'll low pass all of my patches.
Wow.
90, 125. I'll pull everything out because I don't belong down there. You know what I mean? And then a lot of times, voicing wise, harmony leading, like you were just talking about, there's a lot of times, especially with Zito, I don't play a third. I'll go to very open voicings because a guy like Mike will dance in between
the thirds.
between
That's
the major minor.
blues, yeah.
And you can play a minor scale over major blues and it sounds great, but if I'm playing a third,
Right.
Don't play a major scale over minor blues, though.
yeah. If I'm playing a third, first off, it sounds hokey.
Right.
It sounds sugary,
Yeah.
and there's not a dark, aggressive tone, a moody tone, rather. So a lot of times I'll have to consciously make myself eliminate the third and also change my voicings. When you learn piano, you learn the C chord first. Not a lot of blues played in C.
Right.
So
right.
as a keyboard player, you have to learn
E.
different hand
A.
positions, So I will also
Yeah, it's not a guitar key.
I'll also go to a lot of it. It's terrible. I don't know why they C. Start. We should start in keys that Western music is performed in. But I'll have to change my voicings too to stay out of the vocal and the color work instruments that are in there too. I know that's kind of deep, but the more open that chording is, the better it sounds.
So
Yeah,
if you don't
voicing.
use the
Voicing
three,
is huge.
if you don't use the three, what do you use?
I let whatever vocal.
1.5.
I'll do a 1.5. I'll do a 1.7. I'll put the 7 on the bottom and take the 5 on the top, and never touch the 1 or the 3. Like if I'm playing C blues, I might be hitting a B flat and a G here, and that's it.
I got you.
You know, it's almost an inverted G minor, but C7, and that lets the guitar player and the vocal work, you
Yeah.
know, unencumbered around the melody.
I got you.
You know what I'm saying? Keeping it wide open. So that was my paradigm.
Yeah.
I'm still trying to learn that, you know. Stay out of people's way, musically.
Stay out of people's way.
Yeah.
All right. Well, that's pretty good. I mean, that's plenty. So
It's a lot.
we're going to wrap. Anyway, appreciate y'all watching. Love you guys. Frankie Rendazzo, Carl Richardson. Appreciate you guys.
Thank you.
Thanks for having us, Kelly.
Yeah,
This was a
thank
lot of fun.
Really enjoyed
Yeah,
it.
this was awesome. Thank you so much.
So we'll catch y'all next time. Bye.
Cool, man.